Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today's session. My name is Zain Ali, and I'm an Education USA Advisor at our Islamabad office in Pakistan. Thank you for joining today's GRE Quantitative Workshop. Our instructor today is Usman Javed, and we'll hand over the session to him in a few minutes. But first, a little bit about who we are. What is Education USA? Education USA is a global network under the US Department of State, made up of over 425 international student advising centers in more than 175 countries. We are your official source to US higher education through Education USA advisors that are working with advisees to provide updated, comprehensive, and unbiased information on the higher education in the United States. Next slide, please. Next slide, next slide. In Pakistan, we're part of United States Educational Foundation, USEFP, which is also the Fulbright Commission in the country. USEFP promotes mutual understanding between the people of Pakistan and the people of the United States through educational and cultural exchange. We have offices in Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi, but are also available for any student that needs support advising throughout Pakistan via email and call. Other than advising, USCFP also has our programs department that administers multiple fully funded programs, including the Fulbright Scholarship. You can find information on our fully funded programs on our website, uscfp.org. USCFP also has an authorized prometric testing centers in Lahore, Karachi, and Islamabad, which have now resumed operations in person. You can check out our testing facilities on our website, uscfp.org. And for any questions regarding testing, you can email testing@uscfp.org. And so if you ever need to give TOEFL or GRE, you can give that at USCFP's Prometric Testing Center. And I'm now going to hand it over to, I'm going to stop sharing the slides and hand it over to our instructor for the day. Usman, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Usman, and I will be instructor today for the GRE Quantitative section. I hope, let me just see if I have access to the slides over here. Just give me a second. Sorry. Could you continue with the slides that you had already posted up? Because they were kind of from the same from the same workshop that we conducted the other day.
So the slides, you would have. Do you have the slides? Because for virtual,
I do have the slides available over here. I just need to understand how to incorporate them into.
You can just do share screen. You have access to sharing screen as well.
Oh, okay. Cool. So I'm going to go for screen. Is that visible for everybody?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. Let's begin then. Who here is excited about the workshop? I know this is kind of not very interactive, so we'll just have to try and make it a little interactive. If you could just assume that we are in a live physical session. So yeah, if you have any questions, you could either type them out in the chat over here, or you could just raise your hand and you can unmute yourself if that feature is available today, and just ask your question. You don't have to wait till the end of the session to ask any questions. You can ask your questions in between, or whenever you feel comfortable. My name is Usman Javed. Once again, sorry about the glitch and the little bit of hiccup at the beginning, and we'll just get started. I'll just introduce myself a bit about my teaching career. I've been teaching I've been teaching math for a good number of years, over a decade now. I've taught in multiple schools for O and A levels, SATs, and I've been teaching at USEFP since 2014, I believe. Apologies. I've taught multiple sessions at USEFP for GRE and SATs. Now, before we start, does anybody have any specific things that they'd like to discuss in today's session that they would like me to spend extra time over in today's session? If there is anything that you've already had in mind, this would be a good time to share. We can spend more time on that particular aspect of today's workshop as opposed to making it very generic. So if anybody has any specific questions that they'd like me to answer today, this would be a good time to share them. So I can try and spend a little bit of extra time during the session over those specific topics. If not, we're going to start within a minute. I'll just give everyone a chance to type out anything that they'd like to share.
Usman, it seems like some people are having some issue with the voice. Could you perhaps wear headphones? Maybe that would help the echo.
Oh, okay. I am wearing earphones. I'm just gonna change the. I'm gonna see if I can change the quality of the mic. Wait, let me just see if I can.
And everybody, whatever questions or comments you have, please keep putting them in the Q&A box, okay?
Okay, is the audio a bit laggy or is it a lot of echo over here?
It's not lagging, it's just slightly muffled, I think.
Slightly muffled. Okay, so I'll try and speak up a bit. Maybe that would help.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Let's begin. So let's start off with some general information about the test, and we'll take it from there. In case there's the candidates over here who are not familiar with the GRE, this is a computer-based test. Oh wait. Guys, I'm extremely sorry. Just give me 1 second. I've opened up the wrong workshop. I know this is starting off as a disaster. I am extremely sorry about this. Just give me 1 second. There seems to be a slight bit of an issue. Oh yeah, there you go. Got it. I'm sorry, this might seem really unprofessional from my end. I'm extremely sorry about that. I apologize. I accidentally opened up the GRE workshop for the previous format. As you might be aware that the format has changed since September of 2023. Anyways, sorry about all of that. Let's take a deep breath. Let's begin. Why should we take the GRE?
Sorry. Hi, Usman, sorry to cut you off. Could you just close the screen sharing and reshare it? Because I think a lot of people are having problems with it. So if you could just like stop sharing and reshare, that would be really helpful.
Okay, cool. Just give me a second. Is that better?
Yeah, I think now it should be fine. Thank you.
No worries. Once again, apologies for all the delays and all the haphazard stuff going on. Anyways, so let's begin. Why should we take the GRE? we we need to take the GRE, of course. Like most of you would be thinking that the obvious answer would be that you need it for university applications, and of course that is the obvious and the most correct answer. But once again, why take the GRE? Like, even if it's there for university application, why do university applications require the GRE? Because a lot of universities in the world believe that it's a good way of summarizing your analytical skills and your verbal reasoning skills in one small test. Of course, it does not by any means represent you as a candidate, candidate's ability in the field of academics. Of course, it doesn't encompass all of your abilities in one test, but it is a relatively decent measure. If we can all agree on that, it is a relatively decent measure. The reason why I usually discuss this in my workshops is because uh, it's important to understand why we study for something. Because in my opinion, when you're preparing for a test, the most important thing is motivation. If we lose track of why we're studying for a test, there's a good chance that we might lose ourselves within our prep as well. So it's important to understand and to keep on telling yourselves on regular intervals why did you actually register for the test. Just keep on reminding yourselves during your prep, because that will help you keep yourself motivated and keep yourself on track as well. So it's very important to understand why you take the GRE and also to remind yourselves why you're taking the GRE. Sorry about that. Let's move on. So there's a new format for the GRE. Ever since September of this year, the format for the GRE has changed. Previously, there used to be two analytical sections. I'm going to go over the changes in the format, but more of my focus will be on the newer format, because nobody actually needs to know what the old format was, because that's not any of your concern anymore as a candidate. But I'll still go over it in very brief detail.
I'm sorry to cut you off again, but we
That's
still
okay.
seem to have the issue with the slides. If you could once more try to reshare, close screen sharing and
Okay.
reshare.
Oh,
Or maybe you
okay,
can
sure.
rejoin the session altogether. Maybe that could help.
Maybe that would help. I'll try
Yeah.
doing that.
Yes.
I'll try doing. Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, you're. I
Okay.
can hear you. Perfect.
Okay, great, great. I'm going to share the screen now. Okay, great. Can everyone see the screen clearly? Do we have any feedback on it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, where were we? So in the new format, we only have one analytical writing section, which is right at the beginning of the test. In the previous format, we used to have two analytical writing sections at the beginning of the test, and these are right at the beginning of the test. These are in normal words, these are called the essays of the GRE. But now there's only one essay for which you're assigned 30 minutes. Anyways, that's not our concern for this workshop. We'll only be worried about the quantitative part. So I'm going to skim over the verbal sections really quickly. So then after the analytical section, there are going to be two verbal sections. The first verbal section will have 12 questions for which you'll be assigned 18 minutes. The next verbal section will have 15 questions and you'll be assigned 22 minutes. And then we'll move on to the quantitative reasoning sections. We'll have two quantitative reasoning sections. For the first section, you'll be assigned as a candidate. You'll be assigned 12 questions. You'll be asked to do 12 questions in a total of 21 minutes. And for the second section of the quantitative reasoning section, you'll be asked to do 15 questions in 26 minutes. But that's not the format of the test. You'll have the analytical writing section right at the beginning. You'll have the essay, the 30-minute essay right at the beginning. But after that, you'll either get a verbal, which we'll call an English section, or you'll get the quantitative reasoning, which we will call the math section from now on, just to make it simple. So after the first analytical writing section, you'll either get an English section or a math section, right? And you don't, it varies. Like there's no set rule for which section will come first. And then if you get the first section after the analytical section as a verbal section, the next one is going to be math, and then the next one is going to be verbal, and they'll keep alternating between math and verbal from there on. So after the first essay section, you'll either get a verbal section or a math section, and then they'll keep on alternating between verbal and math sections. But the first verbal section that you'll come across will have 12 questions for which you'll be for which you'll be allotted 18 minutes, and the next verbal section that you come across, wherever it is in the test, will have 15 questions for which you'll be given 23 minutes. And for the first math section, whenever you come across it, you'll have 12 questions, and the next math section that you come across will have 15 questions in it. So that's a total of 27. If you just talk about the math sections here, that's a total of 27 questions. 12 in the first section, 15 in the second section, for which you'll be allotted 47 minutes. That's roughly 1.75 minutes per section, which comes down to 1 hour and 45 minutes per section. Now, a lot of people look at this number and they just assume that you have to complete every question within 1 minute and 45 seconds. Even if you can complete the question in 30 seconds, they just assume that you have more time for every question. That's not how it works. That's not how I want you to look at it. There will be certain questions that you'll be able to complete very, very quickly. But then there'll be other questions that will require a bit more time because they will be more difficult. So this is just this is just a reference number. 1 minute and 45 seconds is just a reference number. Don't be stuck on it too much because there will be questions that you will be able to answer within 30 to 45 seconds. Maybe even quicker than that, depending on your ability. Anyways, and if the question requires you to spend more time on it, don't fixate on it. Don't let it go. There will be certain questions in the test that will require you to spend more time on. So just take them in your stride. Just know that there will be at least 2-3 questions in every section that will require you to take maybe 3 minutes, 3.5, 2.5, 3 minutes, maybe even 4 minutes per question. Don't worry
Usman,
about it.
sorry to cut you off, Usman. There still seems to be some issue with the slides. Could you just email me these slides and I'll screen share it, and then you can just tell me to go to the next slide, and I think that would possibly help.
Sure.
Yeah, you can just email it to me.
Okay, just give me a second. I'm gonna email you the slides. Then I've emailed you those slides. We'll just wait for Zen to share the screen, and we'll continue from there.
Yes, I've received them, just about to share screen.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, Usman, you can just tell me when to next slide.
Okay,
or
sounds good. Sounds good. This is where we are right now. Cool. Can everyone see the slides clearly? Okay, I'm assuming everyone is on board. Okay, cool. So we will move on. We were discussing how much time you should spend on each question. Roughly 1 minute 45 seconds. But of course, there will be certain questions that will require you to spend more time on. So I would recommend that you uh, do spend time on those questions. But that does not mean that you start spending around 8 to 10 minutes on a question. That's just not viable. Like if a question is requiring you to spend that much time on it, just move on. I'll tell you what I mean by move on in a few slides. Of course, this is a computer-based test. This is not a paper-based test. Then, if you could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here's a summary of what we just discussed. If anybody wants to take notes, this is a good slide to take notes from. This is a summary of what we discussed on the previous slide. The total time for the overall test has been reduced to almost 2 hours, and there are going to be 5 sections now. So that's a good thing for everybody. But at the same time, it's not that good of a thing either, because of course you'll be spending less time during the test, but the margin for error has significantly reduced. In the previous format, you could make more errors in questions and still get a very decent score. Now, if you want to get if you want to get an above average score, if you want to score an excellent score, you need to be really, really on top of your game. You can't mess up any questions. The margin for getting incorrect answers is very small now. We'll discuss that in detail right at the end of our workshop. I hope this was plenty. This gave plenty of time for everybody to copy down the general format of the test. So we're going to move on to the next slide now. Okay, thank you. Well, the previous one, please. Yes, thank you. The test is section-wise adaptive. Now that's an interesting statement right there. What does that mean? What do we mean by section-wise adaptive? What this means is that if you do well in the first math section, the next math section is going to be slightly more difficult. And if you don't do so well in the first section, the next math section is going to be slightly easier than the first one. And this works between 2 math sections or 2 verbal sections. It doesn't work between verbal and math. What I'm trying to say is if you do well in the first verbal, the next verbal section gets affected, the next math section does not get affected. So it is the difficulty of the test is adaptive based on how well or how poor you're doing in the test. If there are people out there who have sort of broken the algorithm but that's their research, and I'm going to go quote somebody's research over here. If you get if you get around in the first math section, if you get around 4 to 8 questions right, the next math section is going to be of the same medium difficulty. If you get more than 8 questions right in the first section, the next section is going to be slightly more difficult than the first one. If you get less than 4 questions right in the first section, the next section is going to be easier than the first one. That's somebody else's research. It's available on the internet. It's available on YouTube. Somebody who claims they've broken down the algorithm, but something that sort of makes sense for me as well. When I went over the research, it made sense. So yeah, it is definitely section-wise adaptive. Now, some people might be wondering, how about we just mess up the first section and we'll get a lot of easy questions in the second section and we'll get all of them right, and that should give us a very good score. That's not how it works. Even if the second section is easy and you get all of them right, you can't cross the 160 barrier. It's just an unsaid rule in the GRE. If you get all the questions right in the second section and it's an easy section, there's still no chance of you crossing the 160 mark. We'll discuss the scoring of the test down the road, but just as an example, just understand that there is no way that you could score a very, very good score if you have the second section as an easy section. So our aim as a candidate should be to make sure that the second section is a difficult section, not an easy or medium section. That should be our aim. But once again, all of this comes down to what your target score is at the end of the day. We'll be discussing target scores right near the end of the workshop, and we'll be discussing the scoring of the overall GRE at the end of the workshop as well. But for now, just understand that if you do well and the difficulties in between the sections is not very, very drastic. Of course, once you are practicing for questions and sections, you'll be able to feel the change in the difficulty. But as a general rule, you can still tell the changes in the difficulty, but it's not very, very drastic, is what I'm trying to say. It's not like it's not gonna be a completely different test. It's still gonna be the same format and same type of questions. Yeah, let's move on to the next slide then. Then I'm sorry you have to go through this.
No, it's quite all right. Let me just give me a second. Let me try and reshare the slides.
Take your time. Take your time. And on behalf of USEFP and myself, I would like to apologize to all of the candidates for this stop-start nature of this workshop so far. Hopefully, we'll make sure that's smooth from here onwards. There you go. All right, so what does the quantitative reasoning section measure? Basically, it measures our basic elementary math skills. Nothing like if I were to summarize the answer for this question, it would be one sentence. It measures our basic elementary, no, I wouldn't say elementary, basic secondary math skills. When I say secondary, I'm talking about secondary school math skills. So anybody who's passed grade 8, 9 should be fairly good with the math content of the GRE. There will be some topics that would be new for you, but they won't be very, very difficult, is what I'm trying to say. So there's certain subtopics that are tested. I'm going to go over those subtopics. You're tested on your arithmetic skills. You're tested on your algebra skills, geometry, and a little bit of data analysis as well. In future slides we're going to discuss what topics are covered in arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and data analysis. I usually call this a reading test more than a math test because sometimes you have to extract the math out of the question. And I've noticed, I've been teaching math in Pakistan for a while, and I've noticed that a lot of people struggle with word problems over here. What we refer to as word problems, wordy questions, the questions where you have to extract the math out of the question. You will get a lot of those in GRE. They're also referred to as real life problems, or you understand what I mean by word problems. A lot of people struggle with those questions, so that which is why I call it a reading test, because you have to extract the math out of those questions. So we will in my classes, I usually go over how to get rid of the fluff in the question, how to get rid of the extra words in the question, and try to extract the mathematical part of the question from all of the from the paragraph that's given to you. So it's an interesting task, but of course, as far as the scope of this workshop is concerned, we won't be able to go over it. It's just something that I thought that I would share with you guys. That it's a skill that you should definitely polish if you plan on taking the GRE sometime soon. Let's move on to the next slide, please. A lot of people ask me this question: is a calculator allowed? I guess we'll find out on the next slide. Yes, you are allowed to use a calculator. It's an on-screen calculator, and this is what it looks like. I'll give you a disclaimer. It's a horrible calculator. I always hate on-screen calculators, especially when you have to use a mouse and it's not a touchscreen that you can use. It takes a bit of getting used to. So I would recommend that whenever you are preparing for your test, whenever you're doing practice at home or wherever you're practicing, I would recommend that you keep a laptop or a desktop on hand and you use the calculator from the Windows or the Mac iOS using the mouse pad or an actual physical mouse, because that will sort of get you used to. Of course, everyone knows how to use a calculator. It's just getting used to this on-screen calculator and not getting frustrated by it on test day is what I would like you guys to be familiar with. The functions are very basic. It's addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and the square root symbol is what you should be concerned with. The top three symbols, MR, MC, M plus. I'm a math major, and I can say this very proudly. I've never used these symbols on any calculator ever. I don't know if anybody does. Maybe people do. People smarter than me, maybe they do, but I've never used them. I wouldn't want you to worry about those buttons either. The brackets, they're not very reliable when it comes to calculators which don't have dual screens. Dual displays, not dual screens, dual displays. Everyone's used to using those Casio fancy calculators nowadays, which has a display on top, and within the same screen, it has a display on top and then a larger display. The display on top shows you all of your operations that you're pressing, right? It shows you the brackets, but with such calculators, the brackets are not visible, so it can get a little tricky. So I would recommend that you use a calculator only when it's absolutely necessary. The little transfer display button at the bottom, it's not a little button actually, it's the largest button on the calculator. Just remember it, and we'll discuss it in a few slides. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the calculator. I guess we'll move on. The arithmetic topics. What topics are discussed in the arithmetic part of the syllabus? This is the actual syllabus for the GRE then, that we're going to discuss right now. Properties and types of integers such as divisibility, factorization, prime numbers, remainders, odd and even numbers. Now, you might be familiar with most of these terms. There might be a couple of terms in there that you've forgotten that you'll just need to brush up on. But just by looking at these topics, you would understand that these are very, very basic concepts that are usually discussed in grade 6, 7, or 8. Actually, even before that. The next bullet point would be arithmetic operations, which are addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, exponents, which are powers, and roots, which are square roots and cube roots. Yeah. So once again, nothing fancy over here. Something pretty basic, something that most people have studied in their academic careers. Lastly, we have concepts such as estimation, percentages, ratios, rate, absolute value, the number line, decimal representation, and sequences of numbers. Fancy words, very basic concepts. The only thing that might be new for some people would be the concept of absolute value, but it's not something that's very difficult or very extensive. although it can be, but as far as the GRE is concerned, we don't go into a lot of details. So if you just look at the rest of the topics, they're fairly simple and self-explanatory. Like we don't really have to go into a lot of details over here. Number line, we've all seen the number line. Sequences of numbers, any sequence, 2, 5, 7, 10, whatever, right? These are sequences. Anyways, I guess that's pretty much it from the topic of arithmetic. We'll move on to algebra now. On the next slide. Yeah, there it is. So algebra has operations with exponents. So we'll have variables with powers. Once again, we won't go beyond the power of 2, so we'll be dealing with quadratics mostly at best. Otherwise, most of the things will be linear. Now, if anybody is not familiar with these terms or have forgotten what they mean, linear means anything related to a straight line. So basic equations with maximum power of the variable to be 1 is a linear equation. An equation in which the maximum power of the variable is 2 is called a quadratic equation. Power is a small number that's written on top of a variable or a number. And in American mathematical terms, it's called an exponent. Anyways, factorizing, simplifying algebraic expressions, relations, functions, equations, and inequalities. The functions topic sometimes scares a few people off. These are very basic functions. These are super basic functions. They're not complicated at all. When we talk about solving linear and quadratic equations and inequalities, once again, we just talked about what linear and quadratic equations are, and you'll learn how to solve them in equation form and inequality form. This is something that gets discussed in GRE classes. Sorry about that. Then we're going to talk about solving simultaneous equation and also dealing with simultaneous inequalities as well. You probably heard the term simultaneous equations at some point. It's just solving two equations simultaneously, which is where the word comes from. Then we talk about setting up equations to solve word problems, which is something that we talked about earlier, where we extract the math part and we formulate equations based on the information that's provided to us, and then we solve those equations. Solving the equations part is usually the easier part. It's formation of the equation or understanding what's being asked in the question is usually the more difficult part for candidates that I've noticed over the years. But once again, it's something that's discussed in further detail in GRE classes, wherever you study. I'm sure your instructors will go over these things in more detail. Lastly, we're going to talk about coordinate geometry, which includes graphs of functions, equations, inequalities, intercepts, and slopes of lines. All of these words you've seen or heard of or studied at some point in your lives. Graphs of functions, that sounds complicated, but it isn't. It's just graphs of straight lines or graphs of quadratic equations, which are parabolas. I don't know if you're familiar with them right now. I'm sorry. But it's something that you won't be asked to draw them. Of course, it's a computer-based test. Of course, you won't be asked to draw them, but you could be asked to match a graph to an equation or extract information from a graph. I'm sorry about that. I got the cough today. Just trying to keep myself hydrated. Anyways, so yeah. Then we talk about intercepts. Intercept is where two lines intersect or two graphs intersect. And then slopes of lines. Slope is an alternate word for gradient. Gradient is primarily used in British mathematical terms, and slope is used in American mathematical terms. Then could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Topics that would be studied in geometry. It's a subtopic that usually scares a lot of people, in my opinion, or in my experience actually. But the topics in geometry in the GRE are fairly basic, and they don't require a lot of prior knowledge on the topic, which is a good thing, which is something that I've noticed is a very good thing for most candidates. Because GRE candidates might not have studied math for a number of years, so they do need a bit of a refresher. But as far as geometry is concerned, when you study for the GRE, you can start fresh, and even if you don't remember anything from your school days or your university days, it's still all right. There are parallel and perpendicular lines. We'll talk about circles, area of circles, circumference, sector of a circle. We'll talk about triangles, isosceles, equilateral. Then there's going to be a 30, 60, 90 triangle. We're going to talk about quadrilaterals. We'll talk about polygons. Polygon is just a closed shape. Poly means many. Polygon is just a closed shape. So we could talk about a hexagon, a heptagon, but not in a lot of details. Just the interior angles and the sum of interior angles is the extent of will be the extent of our discussion as far as polygons are concerned. Congruent and similar figures. Congruent implies exactly the same. Similar would be two things that are kind of the same shape but different sizes. So this is a little bit of a difference between congruent and similar figures. A lot of people confuse between the two. So just a refresher for everyone. Then we'll talk about 3D figures. They're going to be cubes, cuboids, spheres, cylinders, and yeah, that's pretty much it. We're going to talk about areas, perimeter, volume of all of these shapes. Volume, of course, is only going to be for 3D figures. Area and perimeter would be for 2D, and area would be for 2D and 3D figures. Surface area for 3D figures, of course. Then we're going to talk about the Pythagorean theorem. As far as trigonometry is concerned, it's not going to be a lot of detail. You're not going to be required to memorize the sine rule or the cosine rule or any other trigonometric ratios. We'll just be talking about the Pythagorean theorem, which is the most basic thing, in my opinion, in trigonometry. So it's fairly simple and straightforward. Angle, measure, and degrees, which is we'll be talking about angles of different shapes, interior angles, exterior angles, sum of interior angles, sum of exterior angles, and so on. Let's move on. Let's move on to the next slide. By the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to share your questions in class. All right, data analysis topics. Before we discuss data analysis topics, I'd just like to discuss what data analysis would be. Data analysis is when you get a chart or a group of charts, and you ask questions based on those charts. It's almost like comprehension for math. You're given a piece, you're given some information, and then you're asked to answer questions based on the information that's been provided to you. The little trick is that a lot of people, which might seem very obvious, but a lot of people seem to forget, is that you're supposed to answer the questions based on the information that is given in the chart, not based on information that you might have gathered elsewhere from another source outside of the test. So, for example, if you're talking about population of a country, you might assume you might have read an article recently that told you about the population of the country, but in the test they use a different figure. Maybe it's an older figure, maybe it's a more updated figure. So don't use information that you know outside of those charts and graphs. Just use the information that's mentioned over there, which is what we do in comprehension as well. Which is why I'm calling this comprehension for math. When you get where you get one or multiple charts, and then you answer, then 2 or 3 or 4 questions follow that chart. Anyways, we'll be discussing the strategies that you should use for those questions. But for now, let's just discuss the topics that you'd face in such questions. You'll come across some basic descriptive statistics, mean, median, mode. You've all heard of these things. Then we'll talk about range, which is the largest value minus the smallest value. In my opinion, that's probably the easiest thing in stats. Then we come across standard deviation. You will not be asked to calculate standard deviation. You'll just be asked to interpret standard deviation in a way where you have 2 quantities and you have 2 standard deviations, and or maybe you have 2 data sets, and you will be asked to compare the standard deviations of both data sets. You won't be asked to calculate it, so you won't be going over those lengthy formulas. Then we have interquartile range, which I've sort of shortened over here to the form of IQR. Interquartile range is just upper quartile minus lower quartile. Once we study quartiles, this will seem like a piece of cake for you guys. Quartiles and percentiles are something that need to be discussed, but once again, that's something that gets discussed in classes. But these are very simple and basic concepts, so I'm pretty sure that you guys will not struggle with them at all. When it comes to interpretation of data in tables and graphs, such as linear graphs, bar graphs, circle graphs, box plots, scatter plots, frequency distributions, you'll read the graphs, and when you do practice for data interpretation, you'll come across different types of graphs, and you'll learn how to interpret them and use the information that's mentioned over there to answer the questions that follow these graphs. When we talk about elementary probability, such as probabilities of compound events and independent events. Now, this is something that troubles a few people, the concept of probability. But remember that this does not require you to study probability in a lot of detail. This is going to be very, very basic form of probability. And you don't get a lot of questions on probability in my experience. But that does not mean that you skip the topic. But what I'm trying to say is that you should not be afraid of this topic. We'll move on then. We have random variables and probability distributions. Once again, the actual words in the syllabus are more difficult than the concepts that are going to be tested in the exam. So don't worry about these fancy words that are mentioned over here. If you're not familiar with mathematical terms, these might seem a little daunting right now, but trust me, you do not have to worry about that. And I'm not saying that because I'm a math major myself, and it comes easily to me. I'm saying this through experience, that once studied, these concepts are easy for most people out there. Lastly, we discuss counting methods such as combinations, permutations, and Venn diagrams. You get questions on combinations and permutations, and there are ways to solve questions without using Venn diagrams as well. It's something that I usually discuss in my classes, where I teach candidates not where they don't have to use Venn diagrams, because in my opinion, Venn diagrams can be a little bit of can be time consuming during the GRE. They're very accurate, but they could be time consuming. So I usually teach methods which don't require you to use Venn diagrams. Combinations and permutations are counting methods. You don't have to know the formula for NCR and NPR. It's just very basic counting. Like you've seen the calculator. It does not have the NCR, NPR functions. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, well and good. If you don't think that you're missing out on anything. You're not. I'm just talking about something that's not in the scope of the syllabus. So yeah, well, what I'm trying to say is it's going to be very, very basic. Let's move on. The next slide, please. Thank you. Before we talk about the 4 types of questions, you guys must be wondering that I've kept on talking about how basic the syllabus is. Then why doesn't everyone get a very high score in the GRE? It's not about the subject matter. It's about how you attempt the test, how well you perform under pressure, how good you are with time management, and a lot of other factors as well. So it's not just about your ability to solve mathematical questions, because I believe that if you have spent enough ample time understanding the syllabus and practicing questions, if you have gone over the syllabus in a lot of detail and have spent good time practicing, then you should not struggle with most of the question if you are given ample time. If the time restriction is removed from the test, most people would perform well, given that they have prepared adequately. But as soon as you bring in the time element, a lot of people start panicking, and that's when you start getting incorrect answers. But that's how it is with most tests in the world. So you don't just have to be accurate, you have to be speedy as well, which is something that requires a bit of practice. I won't lie, it will require a bit of practice. And also, you will have to memorize a few things. I know a lot of you have been told all your lives that math is just about practice. It's not about memorizing stuff, but I will assure you, for this test, you will have to do both. You'll have to do a bit of memorization and you'll have to practice. Okay, anyways, we'll talk about the 4 different types of questions in the quantitative section. The first type of question that you will face is a quantitative comparison question. Then we'll come across it. Where in a quantitative comparison question, you're given 2 quantities and you're asked to compare between them. Either one of them is greater than the other, or they're both equal, or there's secret option number 4, which is that the relationship between the 2 quantities cannot be established. We will be discussing all of these questions, all of these types of questions in detail with examples. So the second type of question that you will come across is an MCQ, where you have to select one answer choice. And the third, which is a regular MCQ, you'll have 5 options and only one of them will be correct. The third type of question is an MCQ, where you select one or more answer choices. So you could have one answer which is correct, you could have more than one answer which is correct. We'll discuss them in more detail. And the last type of question that you come across is a numeric entry question. Now, there's a good mixture of all 4 types of questions. There's no guarantee which type of question you'll come across more of. Secondly, there's no guarantee which type of question will come in which section of the test. There's a good mixture of these types of questions. I've noticed through experience that the ETS does not confirm this, by the way, but I've noticed through experience that the quantitative comparison questions are the first questions in every section. The first few questions in every math section are usually quantitative comparison questions. But having this information should not affect your preparation in any way. Just because you know that the first type of question is going to be a quantitative comparison question, that should not affect your preparation. By the way, once a section is opened, you can answer the first question or the last question in that section, or you can answer the questions in any order you want. Now, you can start off from the 5th question, you can then answer the 7th question, you can go on to the last question or the first question, whichever order you prefer. There's no restriction. But you cannot go back to a section that you've answered. And secondly, there is no penalty for an incorrect answer. If you get a question wrong, there's no penalty for it. There's no negative marking. So I strongly recommend that you answer all types of questions. Anyways, these are the 4 different types of questions. We'll discuss them in more detail. We'll discuss their strategies, and we'll discuss some examples of each type of question as well. Zen, if you could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the first type of question that we were going to discuss is a quantitative comparison question. There are 2 quantities, quantity A, quantity B. And these 2 quantities are followed by these 4 options. It's very important that you, through your practice, you don't have to sit down and memorize them, but through practice, you memorize these answer options. Once you do enough practice, you will automatically know what these answer options are, so that on exam day, you can save some time and not read the answer options over there. Because when you see this type of question, you will automatically know what the answer options are, so you don't have to read them over there. So you can save a bit of time. And how would you identify this type of question? You will see a quantity A on the left and a quantity B on the right. We'll see a couple of examples. We'll go over a couple of examples soon, and you'll understand what I mean by that. But these are the 4 answer options that will always be there for these types of questions. Just memorize these answer options, and that will make your life much easier. We'll go over these answer options. Option A is quantity A is greater than quantity B. Option B is quantity B is greater than quantity A. Option C is the 2 quantities are equal. Option D is the relationship cannot be determined from the given information. Now, a lot of people are attracted by option D, but there's only one situation in which you can select answer option D. We'll discuss it when we discuss some examples. Then if you could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So what are the strategies that we should follow for a quantitative comparison question? Firstly, become familiar with the answer choices. We just discussed that. Secondly, compare. It's a quantitative comparison question. It's not a quantitative calculation question. You just have to compare between the two quantities. That does not mean that you have to come up with answers for both quantities and then select an answer option. You can simplify both quantities till the point where you can compare them. Like this might seem a little alien to you right now, what I'm discussing, but once we discuss a few examples, this will become a lot more clear. But just understand that you have to compare, you don't have to calculate the answers right down to the final values. Geometric figures are not necessarily drawn to scale, so do not trust them. So just because an angle looks like a 90 does not mean that it's 90 unless it's clearly implied in the question. How do you imply a 90-degree angle? Either by the little square that's drawn over there, sorry, or that's clearly mentioned in the text of the question that's a 90-degree angle. But what I'm saying is just because two sides look equal does not mean that they're equal unless they're clearly mentioned or implied in the question. So do not trust the diagrams. If both quantities are numeric values, are numbers, then option B cannot be the correct answer. Because if you're comparing two numbers, one number is going to be greater than the other, or they're going to be equal, right? You can't have a situation where the relationship cannot be determined between the two quantities if they're numbers. So option D cannot be the correct answer if both quantities are numeric values. Now, the last bullet point, I'd like you guys to concentrate on the last bullet point. Option D is the correct answer if and only if you are sure there are multiple correct answers. Option D is the only correct answer if you are sure that you're getting multiple correct answers. So, for example, quantity A is a value, quantity B is a value, and both of them are in variable terms. And you start plugging in numbers just to find out what quantity A could be versus what quantity B could be. As an example, on your spreadsheets that you have, on your notepads that you have right now, if you could write down quantity A on the left and quantity B on the right, for quantity A, if you could write down variable X, and for quantity B, if you could write down variable X squared. And you were to compare the two quantities, a lot of people would initially lean towards quantity B because X squared seems to be greater than X. But that's not always the case. What if X is 0? We don't have the values for X, right? What if X is 0? If X is 0, then both quantities are equal. But if X is 2, then quantity A is 2 and quantity B is 4. In that case, quantity B is greater. When we chose X as 0, both quantities were equal. But when we chose X as 2, quantity B was greater. So we're getting multiple answers which are conflicting each other. In the first case, we got C as the correct answer when we chose X as 0. In the second case, we chose X as 2 and we got B as the correct answer. So we got two answers, we got multiple answers. Hence, the relationship between the two quantities cannot be determined, which is the only case in which you will select option D. Option D is not there just because you are unable to solve the question, so you could just lean towards option D. Although it seems very attractive, I understand that it's an attractive option, but that's not how option D would be the correct answer. The only reason option D would be the correct answer is if you get multiple correct answers, such as in the example that we just discussed. Although it was a very rudimentary, basic example, that sort of made you understand, hopefully it made you understand what I mean by multiple correct answers. Could we move on to the next slide, please? So here's an example of a quantitative comparison question. Quantity A is clearly mentioned on the left side, which is 54% at 360. Quantity B is 150. We don't have to read the answer options because we know that option A is going to be quantity A is greater, option B is going to be quantity B is greater. C is going to be that the two quantities are equal, and option D is going to imply that the relationship between the two quantities cannot be determined. Anyways, let's solve this question together. 54% of 360 versus 150. A lot of you would be tempted to figure out what the value of quantity A is, what the numeric value of quantity A is, you might be tempted to figure that out. But do we need to calculate it? Is this a quantitative calculation question or a quantitative comparison question? We just need to figure out whether A is greater than B or not. Firstly, for this question, sorry about that. For this question, we know that the two quantities are numeric values only. So D cannot be the correct answer. A relationship will definitely be determined between the two quantities. This 54% of 360 will be a number. So there are two numbers on either side, and we're comparing them. That means D cannot be the correct answer. So it has to be A, B, or C. Now, if we were to simplify this question for ourselves, if we were to just look at 50% of 360, half of 360, 50% is usually half, right? 50% of 360 is 180. So we know that quantity A is greater than 180. This 54% of 360 is going to be more than 180. If 50% of 360 is 180, that means 54% of 360 is going to be more than 180. So quantity A is greater than 180 for sure. And quantity B is 150. So definitely quantity A is the larger value. We don't actually need to know the value of 54% of 360. We just have to calculate. Oh, sorry, we just have to compare, not calculate. This is, I've plugged in this example just to reiterate the fact that you have to compare. But there will be questions in which you have to calculate all the way till the end. You have to calculate the value of quantity A and the value of quantity B and then compare. There will be some questions in which you'll have to go all the way. But I would recommend that you stop wherever you can compare. Anyways, let's move on to the next question. I hope nobody has any questions. Oh. All right, next question. Lily is younger than Maria. So a little trick that I usually use in my in tests is that I never read out names or proper nouns. I never read out proper nouns, names of places or people, because you might know somebody of that name and your mind can get distracted very quickly. Or you might have visited that place, or you might have thought of that place sometime recently. So your mind could get distracted once again very quickly. So usually I just read initials. So L is younger than M is what I would try and read. Just ignore the name. That usually helps me. I don't know if it's going to be effective for you guys as well, but that's something that usually helps me. Anyways, so we have two quantities once again. So just by looking at the question, we know it's a quantitative comparison question and we don't have to read the answer options. Quantity A is twice of L's age and quantity B is M's age. We just know that this person L is younger than M. How much younger? We have no idea. So let's just try and plug in values. It's always best to try and plug in values very quickly because it simplifies the question very, very quickly. Twice of, let's just assume that L is younger than M and we can plug in values 1 and 2, right? Let L be 1, let M be 2 years old. So twice of L's age would be the number 2 times 1, which would be 2. And quantity B would be M's age, which we assume to be 2. So in the numbers that we've chosen, which are 1 and 2, 1 being L's age, 2 being M's age, we have quantity A as number 2 and quantity B as number 2 as well. In the numbers that we've chosen, we get C as the correct answer. But we don't stop right there. We don't just select C and move on. We're going to try another set. We're going to try and disprove C now. We're going to try and come up with another answer so that we can select option D because that's a very attractive option, right? So let's try another pair of numbers. Let's try 1 and 10. 1 for L and 10 for M. In that case, what would be quantity A? That would be 2 times 1, which is 2. And M's age is 10, which is quantity B. So we're comparing 2 as quantity A and 10 as quantity B. Of course, in that case, quantity B is the greater quantity. So we're getting multiple answers. And what do we do when we get multiple answers? We select option B and we move on, right? Obviously, option D is going to be the correct answer. All right, let's move on to the next question now. Another quick question. If anybody wants to try it, they can. Otherwise, we can move on to the next type of questions. I just want to give you guys multiple examples of quantitative comparison question. If anybody is curious, like if Zen, if you could go back, yes, thank you. If anybody is curious on how to attempt this question, just take 2 power 29 common from quantity A in the numerator. Just take 2 power 29 common. You'll be left with 2 power 29 bracket 2 power 1 minus 1, and that would, when you cancel stuff out, you'll be left with 2 power 28 as quantity A and 2 power 28 as quantity B, and eventually C will be the correct answer. If you did not understand what I just said, it's completely all right. It's something that's probably going to be discussed in the topic of exponents in your lectures. Anyways, let's move on to the next question. Thank you. So MCQ, select one answer choice. This will be a regular looking MCQ with 5 options, right? And only one of them is correct. The answer options will look like circles or ovals. So answer options A, B, C, D, E will be encircled in ovals or circles. That's how you know it's an MCQ where you have to select only one answer. Let's move on to the strategies for such MCQs on the next slide. Thanks. So you have to read the answer options when you read the question, because when you read the answer options, you're actually sort of reading the question as well, right? And that sort of gives you a good idea of what your final answer should look like. Maybe there are certain units mentioned in the question, in the answer options, that you should go over. So you know, for example, if your answer options have meters per second as the unit, and when you read the question again, when you go back to the question, you're extracting information from the question, you will know that your final answer should be in meters per second, which is a valuable information that you've gathered just by reading the answer options. So it's very important to read the answer options when you read the question. All right, next bullet point is this will help you understand what the final answer should look like, which is something that we just discussed. This also helps with approximation because you can eliminate 1 or 2 obviously incorrect answers. Yes, that's a very good point right there. You can, when you read the answer options, you can right away and figure out that 1 or 2 answer options are very absurd in certain questions. Unless it's a high difficulty question, in those questions, most of the answer options are kind of close to each other. But in certain easy and medium difficulty questions, there might be 1 or 2 very obviously incorrect answers. You can eliminate them, and if you're in a hurry, like we discussed earlier, you should never leave a question unanswered, because you will leaving a question unanswered or getting an incorrect answer will give you the same amount of points, 0. So there's no point in leaving a question unanswered. Just attempt every question so that you give yourself a chance of getting more points. Anyways, let's move on. Here's an example. These answer options on the left, A, B, C, D, E, they will be either circled or they'll either be in circles or ovals. So that's how you know this is an MCQ with 1 correct answer. In this example, they're not circled or they're not inside ovals, but in the actual test, they will be. This is a question on probability. A certain jar contains 60 jelly beans, 20 white, 18 green, 11 yellow, 5 red, 4 purple. If a jelly bean is to be chosen at random, what is the probability that the jelly bean will be neither red nor purple? So we don't want red or purple. Out of the 60 jelly beans, how many are red and purple? 5 and 4, right? So out of the 60 jelly beans, you don't want 9 of those jelly beans. You could have anything else other than those 9 jelly beans. So what are we left with? We're left with 51 jelly beans that we would like, right? So the probability of getting those 51 jelly beans out of 60 is 51 upon 60, right? Now it comes to the answer options. Obviously, the first 2 are very obviously incorrect because our answer is 51 over 60, right? 51 over 60 cannot be 0.09. It cannot be 0.15. Even it cannot even be 0.54 because half of 60 is 30 and 51 is far away from 30. So it cannot be 0.54 either. So it has to be D or E. If it was 54 out of 60, it would have been 90% or 0.9, right? If it was 54 out of 60, it would have been 0.9. If you're not comfortable in what I'm saying, it's completely all right. You're allowed to use a calculator for this calculation. I'm just talking to the people who would like to do this calculation mentally or would like to come up with an answer for this question without using a calculator. if you have understood how we came to 51 over 60, you could use a calculator and come up with the final answer. But if you want to skip that part of using the calculator, you want to come up with an answer without using one, this is how I would go about it. I would eliminate the first three options, and I would eliminate option E as well, because if it was 54 over 60, it would have been 0.9. But we're clearly less than 54 over 60. So it can't be 0.91 either. It has to be option D, 0.85. Anyways, let's move on to the next slide. Which of the following numbers is furthest from the number one on the number line? Once again, we have 5 options. You can select an answer. You can draw a number line in front of you, or you can just assume, you can just imagine the number line in front of you. You're on the number one. Look at answer option A. -10 is far away from the number one. -5 is far, but not as far as -10. 0 is very close to number one. 5 is occasionally close to number one, as still not as far as -10. -10 is still winning. And the last option, 10, is far from 1, but still not as far as -10. So option A is the correct answer. And once again, a fairly basic answer, a fairly basic question. I just want you to understand what the format of this question looks like. Let's move on to the next example. MCQ, where we have to select one or more answers. Now, these are interesting MCQs because the answer options will look like boxes. That's how you know which type of MCQ you're coming across. The answer options for MCQs, if the answer options look like boxes, if A, B, C, D, E, F, G are enclosed in boxes, you know it's an MCQ where you have to select one or more answers. But if it's in ovals or circles, you know that you only have to select one answer. Anyways, how do we attempt such questions? First of all, we need to understand what these questions will look like. There will be a minimum of 3 options, A, B, C, right? There could be more than 3 options as well. And there's at least one correct answer. All of the answer options could be correct. If there are 6 options in this question, all 6 of those could be correct, 5 could be correct, 4 could be correct, 3 could be correct, 2 could be correct, but at least one of them is definitely correct. At least one of them is definitely correct. So you will have to go through all of the answer options. In the previous type of MCQ, where you only had to select one answer and there was only one correct answer, as soon as you found your correct answer, you could have selected and moved on, right? But for this type of question, even if you found a correct answer, there could be still more correct answers in the answer options. So you have to go through all of the answer options and select all the correct ones and not select any of the incorrect ones. What I'm trying to say is, अगर आप सारी answer options वो वाली select करते हैं जो ठीक है और वो छोड़ देते हैं जो गलत है, only then will you get credit for this question. So you can't select any extra answer options. You can't skip any correct answer options either. That's the only way to get full credit for this question. And there is no partial credit. Half marks नहीं मिलेंगे किसी चीज को. So there is no half credit for any question. You have to select all the correct answer options and only the correct answer options. None of the incorrect ones, and cannot skip on any of the correct answer options either. Okay. The question may or may not specify the number of choices to be selected. Sometimes the question asks you to select 3 answer options. So you know that there are only 3 correct answers. Sometimes they don't tell you how many correct answers there are. They just ask you to select all of the answer options that imply the correct answer. In that case, you have to figure out कि कितने correct answers हो सकते हैं. Anyways, let's move on to some examples. Actually, before we move on to examples, let's go through some strategies. Be sure to go through all the answer options. We've discussed that. Remember that there could be only one correct answer choice. We've discussed that as well. Sometimes you can figure out the least and the greatest answer values. So sometimes when you're solving a question, you can figure out कि maximum answer की value ये हो सकती है, minimum answer की value ये हो सकती है. So you can select all of the answer options that are between those 2 numbers. Because usually these numbers, they're listed in an order. They're either in an ascending order, छोटे से बड़ी answer options होती है, or they're in a descending order where they go from the largest option to the smallest option. So knowing कि answer option हमारी इन 2 numbers के बीच में हो सकता है is a very good place to be, because then you can select all of the answer options that are between those 2 numbers. Got it? All right, let's move on to some examples. Here's an example. Before we discuss the question, if you can look at the answer options, they're in boxes. That clearly implies that this is an MCQ where more than one correct answer, or where you might have to select more than one correct answer. So, just by looking in the answer option shape, you can identify that ये किस तरह का question है. Let's go over this question really quickly. Last year, Kate spent between 104 and 103 of her gross income on her mortgage payments. If Kate spent 13,470 on her mortgage payments last year, then the following could have been her gross income last year. So basically, she's spending between 104 and 103 of her gross income. We don't know what her gross income is, so we're going to assume it to be X. So 1/4x is going to be equal to 13,470, or 1/3x is going to be equal to 13,470. We'll get two separate values of x, and her gross income will be between these two values of x. So we can select all the answer options that are between these two values of x that we get from the two equations that we've formed. If anybody did not understand the solution, that's completely all right. It's something that's going to be discussed in fractions. In the topic of fractions, when you study for the GRE in your class. But I just want to show you an example of such a question, make you understand that how the answer options come across. Let's move on to the next example. All right. Thank you, Zen. We have another example over here, but unfortunately, due to the formatting of the question, I've screenshotted these questions from the ETS website. Some of the questions over there have not been put. Some of the answer options for some of the questions have not been put in boxes or ovals and circles, so it's not very evident or apparent what type of question it is. But if you look at the answer options, just the number of answer options, there are more than 5. So it's definitely one of those MCQs where you have to select one or more correct answers. There's an MCQ where you have to select exactly one answer, there will be only 5 options. But in your actual test, the answer option will be in boxes, so there is no confusion of it. Let's have a look at this question. Which of the following integers are multiples of both 2 and 3? Indicate all such integers. So the question does not tell you kitne correct answers hai. They just want you to figure that out on your own and select all the correct ones. So we know 2 as option A is 8. It's not divisible. It's not divisible by both 2 and 3, so it's not the correct answer. 9 isn't the correct answer because it is not divisible by 2. They want you to select numbers which are divisible by both 2 and 3. C, 12 is the number that's divisible by both 2 and 3. D is another answer option that's divisible by both 2 and 3. And lastly, F is the last correct answer, which is a number that's divisible by both 2 and 3. So for this question, we'll have to select options C, D, and F. If we skip on option C, for example, and we only select D and F, we won't get any credit for this question. And on the other end of the spectrum, if we select options C, D, E, and F, we still won't get any credit for this question because we selected all the correct ones, but we selected an incorrect answer option as well. So this as an example, I want you guys to understand that if there's only 3 correct answers, you have to select all 3 of them and not skip on any of them and not even select any extra options as well. Let's go on to the next example, please. All right, next type of question, numeric entry question. This is a question in the GRE math section. This is the only type of question in the GRE math section where you don't have answer options. You have to come up with an answer yourself. So, and you're given an answer space and you have to click on it and you have to type out the answer over there. The answer could be an integer, fraction, or a decimal number, right? It could be in any form, and you do not have to type in the units. So for example, if your final answer is 35 seconds, you just have to type in the number 35 and not write seconds over there. It is definitely advisable that you write down the most simplified version of the answer. For example, if your answer comes out to be 5/10, it is advisable to write down 1/2 instead of 5/10. Not and don't leave it as 5/10. In most cases, 5/10 would be the correct answer, but at the end of the day, it's an algorithm. It's that the answers have been fed into the algorithm of the test. Maybe there was a case in which 5/10 might not have been fed into the algorithm. So, but the simplest answer is definitely and always fed into the algorithm. So it's advisable by most instructors out there that you write down, that you type out your final answer in the most simplified form. All right, thank you. Let's move on to strategies. Yeah, let's discuss the strategies for such questions. You have to pay attention to the units mentioned before or in front of the answer box. So there's important information near the answer space as well. Because if they mention the units either in front or before the answer box, that's good hint for you that you have to come up with your final answer in that unit. So if you have to do some final conversion in the last step, that sort of verifies, that sort of reminds you again that you have to give your final answer in certain units. So read the units in front or at the back of the answer box. Make sure you're careful if you are asked to simplify or round off the answer to a certain accuracy. Sometimes a question asks you to round off the final answer to a certain accuracy. For example, if a question could ask you to write down your final answer in the nearest thousands, and your final answer was 3,450. So if you were to round this off 3,450 to the nearest thousand, it would be 3,000. And only 3,000 would be considered as the correct answer, not 3,450. The 3,450 would be considered as an incorrect answer. So you have to be careful and you have to read the last line of the question again. It's important to read the last line of the question again when you're about to select an answer, because that's where a lot of people go wrong. They do all of the hard work, they just don't plug in or select the correct answer because they don't read the question again. So it's very, very, very important that you read the question again before you select an answer or before you type out your answer. Anyways, during the solution, carry out all computations with as many decimal places as possible, not less than 4. So when you're doing your calculations, if you come across decimal numbers, keep the decimal numbers as lengthy as possible. Don't round them up. Don't round them off prematurely. So during your solution, keep every number to at least 4 decimal places and only round off the final answer based on whatever is mentioned in the question, based on the level of accuracy that's mentioned in the question. This strategy should work for all questions in the quantitative reasoning question section, not just for numeric entry questions. This strategy of keeping your values to at least 4 decimal places during your solution, you should do that for all questions in the GRE, for all math questions in the GRE. Because that will ensure your accuracy. Sometimes people round off numbers prematurely, and then when they come to the final answer, they already have been using rounded off values, so their final answer could vary slightly. And if a human being was checking your answer, maybe they might give you more leeway. But a computer algorithm is not as forgiving. So you have to get the correct answer and the correct answer only. Like it can't be off by 1 or 2 numbers or 1 or 2 decimal points. Anyways, let's have a look at some examples for numeric entry questions and see what they look like. Thank you, Zach. So one pen costs. Well, this is obviously a numeric entry question. Just by looking at the question, you can tell that it's a numeric entry question because there's an answer space. There are no answer options. This does not look like a quantitative comparison question where you have 2 quantities and you're asked to compare them. This is definitely not an MCQ where you have to select one answer because you have 5 answer options, which are either in circles or ovals. And this is definitely not an MCQ where you have to select one or more answers because the answer options, they are in boxes. And we don't have answer options over here. So this is clearly a numeric entry question. The reason why this went over all that is just for quick revision. Let's have a look at this question together. One pen costs $0.25 and one marker costs $0.35. At those prices, what is the total cost of 18 pens and 100 markers? This is a very basic question. We just multiply the number 18 with 0.25, which should be 4.5, and then we multiply the number 100 with 0.35, which is 35. And then we add them up. So 35 plus 4.5 should be 39.5, which should be the correct answer. If you're not comfortable doing this calculation mentally, you can obviously, of course, use a calculator and come up with this answer yourself. A lot of you might be wondering, why are these questions so simple and why doesn't everyone get a perfect score if all of the GRE questions look like this? I would like to give that disclaimer. I've selected easy questions for the sake of the workshop, because I just want you guys to understand the types of questions that you will be facing in the GRE and not explain the difficulty of the questions that you will be facing in the GRE. That's not the purpose of the workshop. It's just to make you familiar with the types of questions that you'll be coming across when you prepare for the GRE. Hence, I've only selected simple and easy questions. Second reason for selecting simple and easy questions is not to scare you guys off. Not saying that the GRE has very, very tough questions. It's just that if you just start off from 100, that's not a very good 100 difficulty. From on a scale of 1 to 100, if you start off with a 100 difficulty question, that's not a very smart strategy. You should always start off with some easy and basic questions and then move up the ladder and stop where you're comfortable and then proceed accordingly. Anyways, let's move on to the next example. Thank you, Zain. We have another question where the answer space looks like a fraction. Like our final answer could come out to be a fraction. Why did I use the word could? Obviously, it's clearly, it has to be a fraction, right? Because the answer space looks like it's designed for a fraction. But just because an answer space looks like it's designed for a fraction does not mean that your final answer should always be a fraction. What if for this question your final answer comes out to be the number 5? How would you plug that in? You would plug in the number 5 in the numerator and the number 1 in the denominator and move on. What I'm trying to say is, just because an answer space looks like it's designed for a fraction does not mean that that your final answer should definitely be a fraction. Yes, the chances are that it's a fraction are high. If the final answer space looks like it's designed for a fraction, means that the chances of your final answer being a fraction are high. But by no means it means that it should definitely be a fraction. Well, come to think of it, logically, 5 over 1 is also a fraction. So, hey, we're not wrong over there. Anyways, let's discuss this question really quickly. Rectangle R has length 30 with 10, and square S has length 5. The perimeter of S is what fraction of the perimeter of R? S is a square. If you add up the lengths, 5, 5, 5, 5, it's going to be 20. So the numerator, we want the numerator to be the perimeter of S. That's going to be 20. And we want the denominator to be the perimeter of rectangle R. That's going to be 30 plus 30 and 10 plus 10, which is 80. So we'll end up with 20 upon 80. When we simplify it, it should come down to 1 upon 4. This is what I mean by simplifying. There is a chance that 20 over 80 might be there, might not be there. But I know for a fact that 1 over 4 is definitely will be considered as the correct answer. Anyways, I hope everyone understood what I meant to explain in these examples. Shall we move on to the next slide, please? Data interpretation questions. Once again, there are multiple questions that are going to be based on a table or multiple tables, graphs, or other types of statistical representations. Once again, we discussed earlier that these are going to be comprehensions from math, and you would like to treat them as such. You will not get any quantitative comparison questions. You will not get any quantitative comparison questions when it comes to data interpretation. You will only get MCQs of both types. MCQ where you have to select one correct answer, or an MCQ where you have to select one or more correct answers. or you can get numeric entry questions. We're going to be, you have to answer questions based on the information that's given in the data table and graphs. We've already discussed that. Don't use any information that you've gathered prior to outside of the test. Just use information that's mentioned in the graph and chart. This is the second last bullet point is super important. This is a strategy that I usually teach my students or candidates in a lot of detail. And we spend a lot of time on this because I believe this helps them master the art of solving data interpretation questions. I'll just discuss the strategy with you guys. You should spend the first 20 to 30 seconds because you will know that you will be, when you see data interpretation question, you will know that the next 2 or 3 questions are going to be based on this graph and chart. So logically, it makes sense that we spend some time understanding what the data or the chart is all about, because we will be answering questions on this chart, multiple questions on this chart. So I usually advise that you spend a few seconds. 20 to 30 is an arbitrary number over here that I've mentioned. Sometimes it depends on the size of the data in the chart. Sometimes you have to spend a minute understanding what the data in the chart are all about. What I mean by spending time on the data and chart is that you should read the axis carefully. You should read the scale, a scale if it's mentioned. You should read the heading and the footnotes because there's usually important information. And lastly, you should try and read off a few values off of the chart. That always helps. Try and read a few values off of the chart. Because there's important information to gather, because down the road for the questions you will have to read those values. So it's important to understand what these charts represent, how to read a few values, what's the scale, is it easy to read the values, is it difficult, do you have to use a bit of approximation? Sometimes the scale is designed in a way that you have to approximate somewhat. And try and be as accurate with your approximations as well. So if a bar is between 2 and 3, you should look at whether it's right in the middle of 2 and 3, so you can assume it to be 2.5, whether it's above that, so you can assume it to be 2.6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The subdivisions are not available. Sometimes the subdivisions are not available. Actually, in most cases, the subdivisions between numbers are not available. So you have to do a bit of approximation. So it's important to read off a few values from the chart before you move on to the questions. It's what we do with comprehensions as well, right? We are told, I don't know how it works with the verbal reasoning section, but generally speaking, in school, my instructors would always say that you should read the paragraphs before you run off to the questions. Or maybe you can skim through the questions and then go through the paragraph carefully before you answer any of the questions. So we apply the same strategy over here as well. Anyways, does anybody have any questions so far? Sorry, I didn't entertain you guys or didn't ask earlier if you had any questions. It's been a while since I've asked. Cool. I guess we'll move on to the next slide then. All right, let's talk about some general information about the GRE. Your scores are available within 10 to 15 days after your test date. And these scores will be available in your ETS account on the website. So that's pretty quick. It's pretty urgent. But what happens on the exam day? When you click on the final section, when the final section is over, you get your scores right there and then. I don't know if anybody's been through a GRE test before or they've appeared for mock exams before, but that's how it usually works. As soon as you finish the last section, you get your scores. What do those scores mean, and why do we have to wait for 10 to 15 days to get the same scores again? These are very valid questions. the score that you get on the test day is your raw score. Is your raw score, and it tells you what yours. It usually does not incorporate the difficulty of the sections. It just tells you how many questions you got right. It just gives you a brief understanding of how many questions you got right. Your final scaled scores, the scores that you will get in your ATS accounts after 10 to 15 days of your test date, will be your scaled scores. And that's the score that will be sent to universities. It might vary from your raw score slightly, because when difficulty of the questions or difficulty of the sections is accounted for, sometimes the score is improved or it goes down slightly, but it's not massive. The raw score is a pretty decent idea of how you did on the test. So your scale score and your raw scores do not differ by a lot of points, is what I'm trying to say. So on the day, you understand how you've performed. Let's talk a bit about the scoring, because we've been putting that off since the first slide. And the reason why I put that off till the very end is because firstly, I want to explain what happened in the math section or the quantitative reasoning section. And then I want to discuss the scoring part of the test in a lot more detail, because it's, at the end of the day, that is the most important thing. Because when somebody's taking the GRE, they're not planning on becoming mathematicians. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. But mostly, people take the GRE for the university applications. And the score is the most important thing at the end of the day. The math section is scored from 130 to 170 points. The lowest score you can get in the math section is 130. The maximum score you can get in the math section is 170. The same thing goes for the verbal section as well. It's scored from 130 to 170. So that means your maximum score, GRE score, can be 340, and your minimum GRE score can be 260. The analytical writing section, which is the first section, the essay section, for which you're given 30 minutes, is scored out of a total of 6 points. So the increments over there can be of 0.5 as well, 0.5 points as well. Generally, people consider anything upwards of 4 or 4.5 as a good score out of 6, as a very good score actually. Anything upwards of 5 is an excellent score. Anything around the 3.5 is a very average score. Anything below that is below average for sure. For the math section, which is scored from 130 to 170, anything upwards of 155 is considered as a good, decent score. Anything upwards of 160 is considered as a great score. Anything upwards of 165 is considered as an elite score. That's proper elite level score, where your percentiles are over 90% for sure. But in the new format of the GRE, if you want to score upwards of 165, once again, according to somebody else's research, this is not my own research, so I'm giving that disclaimer out there, but there are people out there who've done some research, and they claim, there are multiple people who are claiming this now, they claim that if you get 2 or more incorrect answers in your math sections, in both the sections combined, if you get more than 2 incorrect answers, if you get more than 2 incorrect answers, then you can say goodbye to a 165 plus score. So this sort of connects back to what we discussed right in the beginning, that they've shortened out the test. The ETS has shortened out the test, definitely, which might seem like a positive thing, but at the same time, it comes with a caveat, which is that the margin of error has been reduced significantly. You're gonna have to score. You're gonna have to be really on top of your game. You can't have more than 2 incorrect answers if you're aiming for a 165 plus. In the previous format, this margin was around 4 incorrect answers, if I remember correctly. This margin of error was for around 4 incorrect answers, but now it has dropped to 2 incorrect answers. So you can only have a maximum of 2 incorrect answers if you're aiming for a 165 plus. Having said that, not everyone is aiming for a 165 plus, of course, because everyone has different aims and aspirations, and different universities require different scores. Uh, I'm not trying to discourage you guys. I'm just trying to tell you that you just need to prepare a little bit better for this new format. You just need to make sure that you practice a lot of the hard difficulty questions, because if you're aiming for a 160 plus score, because you would like your second math section to be more difficult than the first math section. And if you would like the second section to be more difficult in order to achieve a good score, that means you will get harder questions, tougher questions in the second section. So it's important that you study in your practice. You do a lot of practice for the more difficult questions. So your practice and your study schedule comes down to what your target scores are going to be. And your target score is something that you should be very, very familiar with. You should know what your target score is. Maybe get a huge printout and put it up on a wall where you're studying, so that you can look at your target score every day, to motivate yourself and to remind yourself that this is where you need to be. So you should be very familiar with what your target scores are before you start studying for the GRE, because your study patterns and your study schedule will depend on what your target scores are. All right, so third bullet point, within each section, all questions contribute equally to the final score. So once a section is opened, all the questions contribute equally to your score. So all questions will hold the same weightage within a section. So if a question is smaller and does not require a lot of effort versus another question which requires a lot of effort, and they're both in the same section, that means they'll both hold the same weightage. They'll both be marked equally. Just because you're spending more time on a question does not mean you'll get more credit for it. So this tells you one thing very clearly. If you're stuck on a question and it's taking a lot of time, move on. Just select an answer, make a guess and move on. Don't spend too much time on a question. I know earlier I said that there are questions for which you will have to spend 3 to 4 minutes on. But that doesn't mean that you start spending 7, 8, 10 minutes on a question, because that's just wasteful. You have to define a limit for yourself, and through your practice, you will define that limit for yourself. You will understand what questions require you to spend more time, and which type of questions require you to spend less time on. There's no hard and fast rule, because everyone will be preparing differently. Everyone finds certain topics to be certain topics come naturally to certain people, and certain topics come naturally to other people. So so you know what works best for you. There are no unscored or experimental sections in the new format. So in the new format, there are no experimental sections. In the old format, there could be 3 math sections and 2 verbal sections, or there could be 3 verbal and 2 math, and whatever. So out of the 3 verbal or 3 math sections, one of them would be an experimental section, and it would be an unscored section. But you, as a candidate, will not know which of the 3 sections was an experimental section. So that used to extend the duration of the test, and it didn't really help the candidate as such. It was more research for ETS than it was for the candidate of the GRE. So they've removed that experimental section, which is a good thing. That means the test is not as lengthy as it used to be. For the previous test, I would recommend that the candidate keep at least 4.5 to 5 hours free on the day of the test. But now I usually recommend that you spare around 3 hours on the day of the test, 1 hour before the test, just to make sure that your security clearances and you find this place on time, and you seat it properly at the right time, and even if there's a delay for whatever reason, you can still start the test at the correct time. There is no break in the new format of the test. In the previous format, there used to be a 10 minutes break in the middle, which would go by really quickly, but there was still a break. But since they've shortened the time duration of the test to 2 hours, most candidates don't really require a break. So which is a good thing. I believe it's a good thing because you can just when you're in the zone, you're in the zone. So you can take the test. You don't have to like rewire your brain after the break and make sure that you're in the zone once the test resumes. So there's no break. I think that's a benefit for the candidates, but of course it depends on the individual, I suppose. But that's how it is. All right. On the test day, you can designate up to 4 institutes to receive your scores as part of your test fee. So right after you get your raw score, you can select whether you want to forward your scores to 4 different institutes, up to 4 different institutes, uh, free of cost. Well, that has already been accounted for in your test fee. If you wanna, if you don't want to do that, you can let that go. And if you want to send your scores, your test scores to universities after your test date, there's an additional fee for it. And if you want to send your scores to more than 4 institutes on the exam day, there's a small fee for that as well. I thought I'd just share this information because I noticed when I was preparing for the GRE, I did not know about this, and somehow this got skipped. This was back in 2012, I believe, 12 or 13 was when I was preparing for my GRE, 13 actually. Anyways, so this is pretty much it, and I'd like to dedicate the last few minutes for Q&A.
Yeah, so there's a Q&A box. I can open that and just like ask some of the questions people are asking. So
Sure.
the main question is somebody is saying, where can we get sample papers from?
Oh, that's a very good question. Resources. For resources, I'll come to sample papers, but before sample papers, I'd just like to discuss some resources, some generic resources. So you could use websites like Scholar Den, DEN, which is a very helpful website for questions. There are plenty of questions available over there. You could use Khan Academy for lectures. I haven't personally used them myself, but I've heard from numerous sources that they're decent. You will know as a candidate, you will know best what works for you. What's your level of comfort with math? If you're not feeling very comfortable with math, so you might want to spend some time with an instructor, either in a one-on-one setting or in a group setting. There are plenty of resources. There are plenty of instructors out there available in the world. You can do online classes, you can do physical classes. There's so many options available out there. If you want to do self-studying, there are a lot of books available. The books from Princeton Review are very decent. Princeton Review and Kaplan are very decent for self-studying. I recommend them. The ETS website has decent resources. Use them. The sample questions available over there, use them. But now coming to the question of practice tests. The best practice tests available are on the ETS website. The best practice tests are available on the ETS websites. There are 2 of them which are available for free of charge. Absolutely amazing. They mimic the actual test to the dot. And then there are a couple of others available as well that you'll have to purchase. You can use those. They're slightly pricey, but of course it depends on you. If you don't want to spend a lot of money, then you can go to other websites such as Manhattan GRE Prep. They have 1 or 2 free GRE tests available on their website, and then they have 6 paid tests, which I don't recommend. They're very average. Those tests are very average. If you want to purchase tests, I would recommend that you purchase the ETS tests. Other than that, Manhattan, Kaplan, and Princeton Review, they have free tests available on their website as well. So and I would recommend that you take at least 4 tests before you, at least 4 full-length tests in testing conditions before you take the actual GRE. That's something that I usually recommend to all of my candidates. Whether you're aiming for a 170 or whether you're aiming for a 155, you should still take at least 4 full-length tests. But don't waste the ETS tests. They're very, very good tests. Use them as proper resource. Don't just skim through them for the sake of looking at what the actual test would look like. don't waste those tests. They're very, very good tests. So I would recommend that you use them the proper way and use them for proper practice.
Perfect. If it's not a problem for you, in the chat box, could you just type out the name of the resources you said, so everybody can just take a
Sure.
picture too?
Sure. I'm just going to type it out over there.
And while you type that,
Happened,
another
yeah.
question we got was,
Mhm.
will people be able to get scratch paper or like rough paper to do some working or no?
Yeah, that's a very good question as well. Yes, you will be allowed to use a scratch sheet, and you'll be given pencils to work with. Whenever you need more paper, just raise your hand, and somebody will come to your station and hand over more paper to you. Manhattan Cup, Principal Review, Kaplan, ATS website. All right, I've sent out the names of the all the resources that I usually recommend. Do we have more questions?
So can people appear multiple times for a GRE exam?
Yes, you can appear up to 5 times in a year, and the minimum gap between 2 exams has to be 21 days. So you have the option of appearing around 5 times a year, and yeah. But if you're like I usually don't. If you ask me, I usually don't recommend taking tests very, very frequently. I usually recommend that you give a break of at least a couple of months before 2 tests, because that's how you can spend more. That's how you can ensure that you can spend more time on your prep. If you appear for a test 21 days after your previous tests, it usually takes around 10 to 15 days to get your test score, and then you'll register for the next test within a week. That doesn't usually give you enough ample time to prepare for the test. Secondly, generally speaking, I recommend that you spend around 3 to 4 months of proper prep time with at least an hour and a half or 2 a day on average for the GRE prep. Because especially if you've been away from math for a while. That would be my recommendation.
And lastly, the question, somebody said, would SAT preparation be helpful in preparing for GRE?
As far as the subject matter is concerned, there is a little bit of an overlap between SAT math syllabus and GRE math syllabus. There's a bit of an overlap between the two, but not a lot. And as far as the pattern and the types of questions are concerned, there's a huge difference. So as far as the test pattern and the question patterns are concerned, I would not recommend it. As far as the subject matter is concerned, there is a bit of overlap, but I wouldn't say that if you study for the SAT, you're prepared for the GRE, even for the subject matter. So I would not recommend it.
Okay, and just one last question, which I can answer. Will the recording for this session be available? Yes. In a few days, the recording for this session will be up on our USEFP Facebook and YouTube channel, so you can check there. And we also have previous sessions for which recordings are already up on our YouTube channel and Facebook page for USEFP. And once again, thank you so much, Usman, for joining today's session. It was extremely helpful.
No, I hope everyone enjoyed themselves. Thank you for having me over. And once again, apologies for the start. It was not smooth sailing over there. But I hope we made up for it at the end.
And everybody, just to remind you, we have another virtual session tomorrow for the verbal section, 3 to 5, same time as today. So please remember to attend that. And please keep checking educationusa.pk, the upcoming event section, because we have a bunch of virtual and in-person workshops for GRE going on from now all the way up until February. So please keep signing up for those. And remember to follow USEFP and Education USA Pakistan on all social media platforms. That way you can stay up to date on our events and any recordings of our sessions. And once again, thank you so much, Usman. I hope everybody has
You're
a
welcome.
nice night. Okay,
Thanks for having me. Take care. Have a good day. Bye bye.
bye.